They went for a little stroll.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reasonably Fine Art Talk. It's the United States is freezing, and Betty Sue down there in Austin, Texas, still has electricity, and she's managing to still pull the strings behind the scene, as it were. And we have my Charbonneau, my cat, is on my lap, but he is black, so it's always hard to see him. But we have a wonderful guest today, one of my favorite painters and human beings, Valerie Whipple Craig, from somewhere around Philadelphia or somewhere, right? Is that where you are?
Yep, Villanova, about 20 minutes west of Philadelphia.
Right, right, because you go through Villanova, you go through the campus when you take the train out to Wayne, right?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, in case you don't know Valerie Craig, she is a terrific painter. Give us a little overview about the life. Oh, I've got the other cat now, too. Give us a little overview about the life journey of Valerie Whipple Craig. Valerie Whipple Craig.
Okay, well, Valerie Whipple Craig, that's me. I love painting all my life. I wish I had gone to art school, but I took a detour to become a psychiatric nurse for about 25 years. And went into management and administration in psychiatric hospitals and addiction treatment centers, and really loved that job. And during the whole time I painted always, and I did watercolor for maybe 26 years, up until I was like in my early 40s. And then I switched over to oil painting.
How come?
What's up?
How come? Why?
Well, my mother got really sick. She had a massive stroke, and painting has always been my best friend, my life, something I could always turn to. And out of nowhere, I think because of the shock and the deep sadness, I was actually blocked for about 1.5 years. I could not paint, and I think the watercolor was very transparent, which is what I loved about it. But I think it wasn't rich enough. It didn't do what I needed for where I was personally. And I took an oil class, and then went on a little trip with a friend, and I brought oils and watercolor, and I just started painting the oils, kind of used the same technique that I used when I painted watercolor, and actually never have gone back to watercolor, and fell in love with the texture, the thickness of the paint, and what it could do. And I think it just matched where I was emotionally.
Do you think that's a good course of action if people are feeling blocked or at a dead end or whatever, to switch to try a different medium for a while?
Definitely. I absolutely think whatever it is, whether it's pottery, or I have a lot of broken stained glass pieces in my basement. I do a lot of mosaic with that. I cook, anything different is good.
Right.
Playing in the dirt, but and painting furniture. Yeah.
And what has been your evolution as a professional artist?
Let's see, my evolution.
Well, I mean, you do this full time now, right?
I do this full time. And
when you're not training dogs.
Yes.
You have a new dog that you are busy training, right?
Yeah, I have a little puppy that is taking up 2/3, 3/4 of my time. And I squeeze in the painting in between that. But I painted, my journey was always painting. I kind of did some road shows, like those street fairs for a while. That was on the weekends when I was running a nursing department by day, and then I'd do the street fair on the weekend. And I just kept painting and painting. At one point, and I kind of showed in some gallery shows, some group shows, then a gallery with my watercolor. And at one point I kind of put myself out there that I thought I could teach. I'm kind of an optimist, and I hadn't taught, but I knew I could teach. And so I said I was, could lead a group of people. I knew I could, given the chance. And that's kind of how I started.
And do you enjoy teaching?
I love teaching. Yeah, I love teaching, particularly workshops, because I like to teach the way I like to learn. And I love like a 3-day or 5-day intensive kind of study myself, and just complete immersion with a small group. And that's how I like to teach.
So during COVID, have you not been teaching at all, or have you been doing online workshops, or what?
I taught 3 outdoor workshops in the fall, right before it got too cold. I went to a local orchard and brought a group of 12 several times there. And we masked and sweated and hardly could breathe. But it was really great. I was scared, like I didn't know how it would work out, but it worked out really well.
So what's the elevator pitch on how you would say you teach? What is the crux of the Valerie Whipple Craig method?
Oh, probably to be fearless, I think, to get out of your own way. I definitely focus on design and value and having a plan, because I feel that once you have the bones ready or some sort of structure, then you can really dive in and I don't know, paint from your heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
but I want to help. I paint always from life if I'm out in the field, and helping people learn how to see,
right,
and paint what you see rather than what you think you know.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's so funny that, as you know, I think we all, those of us who do this professionally, we have all kind of gone through the learning process of figuring out what it is that it's you got to know how to draw. You really do have to know how to draw if you're doing representationalism. You do have to be thinking about big shapes. You do have to be thinking about, kind of how the eye moves through a painting. And they really are these universal truths that we all discover. But to me, one of the great frustrations teaching is that those universal truths are so simple. Mm-hmm. But what people want to do is the fun, the fun folderol stuff. They do not want to do the universal truths, which is why I do not like teaching, because I just end up wanting to hit my very nice students.
Well, they want to do, and I want to do fancy brushwork, nice thick paint, beautiful color, and that's like the icing on the cake. To me, the color is like the least important part of painting, and brushwork that's the dessert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
You do have to have a little bit of a plan, and so sometimes people will say, I thought you were just like a really loose painter, really gestural, you've really gotten strict. And I think the more I paint, the more I've realized if I have a plan, and as a nurse, I'd say I have the skeleton, then I can put the clothes on,
Right, exactly. Well, let's take a look at some of your stuff and have a little conversation about the paintings as Betty Sue tosses them up there. So talk to us about each one. Just give us a little kind of overview.
Okay, so this guy I worked on last spring during the beginning of the lockdown, and I was taking a lot of paintings out of my bins and seeing if I could reconstruct them, finish some things that I never got around to. This one, and I also got pretty obsessed about a couple different subjects. I did about 8 series on orchards. This one, I did 3 versions of it and got extremely literal because I was using a reference photo with it. And the paintings looked just like the photo, and they were well drawn, but really boring. And so this was version number 3. And I decided, what if it was a bright sunny day in August, the grass was bright green, and I thought, oh, it's so boring. The sky's turquoise, the barn or house was red. And I just went over it with a big glaze, thought, what if it was a winter scene? And kind of repainted the whole painting on top of the bottom layer. And I think it almost went over a cliff a few times, but I think it got more and more interesting. But I had to envision what snow was like. And there was no snow.
It's white. That's the thing I like about it, is you can leave off a whole bunch of paint. But if you're painting over green, then you'd have to add a whole lot of paint.
Whole lot of white. But always thinking but I was trying to imagine that sun is coming from behind the house. So is that snow in front kind of in shadow? What is that? Is the cloud lighter than the snow? All those kinds of fun conversations you have in your head.
Right now, and this is fairly atypical of your stuff, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Though, I mean, it has the trademark broken color and broken shapes that still have the real strength to them. But this has kind of almost I'm seeing it as very kind of a series of planes, whereas a lot of your stuff really flows into one another. I look at the edges, the edge between the barn shape and the large tree shape on the left. Even though it's not a precisely defined edge, it is a definite edge. You're not losing that edge.
Mm-hmm.
And the edge on the right into the foliate line in the far field is still a sharp line. Whereas I think as we look at a lot of other of your stuff, there's a lot more playing with shapes moving, having small areas of really definite contrast, and then areas where the foreground and background merge. And that's one of the beauties of your work. But the harmonious palette you've got going here, I would never have thought that you were working from an August day on this.
Well, good. Well, that's underneath. So yeah, there's a lot of layering on top of this. But
right.
I kind of like what pokes through that you're not even aware of, because there's a whole painting underneath it.
Right. Kind of that's like the Shelby Keefe world of seeing stuff coming through.
I can only dream. I can only dream of that.
Let's look at another one.
Wow.
So that's at the Kerner farm, isn't it?
Yeah, this was another obsession. I don't know what was going on in the spring, but I got locked into these certain subjects. So this one I probably did. I did a whole series on geese too. This one I did maybe 3 or 4, and I did do small pencil plans. Even like how I was dividing the space. And yeah, this is the Kerner's farm, which is where Andrew Wyeth painted quite a bit down in the Chadds Ford area.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath this has, oh gosh, I'm blocking on what that's called when you divide up the canvas with the lines and the structure.
I mean the golden ratio, the golden mean?
Yeah, but some type of grid like that. And I really was careful about where I was placing some of the edges of like where the hill met, where the trees end up, the space between the house and the tree trunk and the other tree trunk, really watching all the play of those negative shapes. So I really don't care what the subject is. I care about what the atmosphere is and what the feeling of the day or the temperature of the day is. But I really am not bothered about what kind of building it is or if it's a tractor. But those spaces in between the tree trunks are extremely exciting to me.
Right. Do you like, one of my favorite artists is Franz Klein, and the negative positive shapes of the tree trunks look very Klein-like to me. Do you like Klein?
I love Klein. Yes. Yeah, I would look at him a lot for design ideas.
Yeah, I think anybody out there in internet land who's not familiar with Franz Klein, if you've been brought up strictly on a diet of representationalism, take a dive into Franz Klein. It's abstract, but it is superb design work. And one of the things, now you and I are both big admirers of the great Douglas Fryer.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things he and I talk about a lot is that we're such cowards because we always end up referencing the literal world, whereas what our paintings actually are abstract shapes of light and dark of varying sizes. And it's like, oh, we should just dare to completely move away from, I'm going to turn that into a tree. But this, I mean, when you put that up there, I had not read the caption.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw it and was like, oh, that's the Kerner farm. And so, I mean, it still is a recognizable, there's something very comforting, I find, as a painter, to still put recognizable shapes in there, because I don't. So then, if people yell at me, it can be, well, it's the Kerner farm. Don't blame me.
Yeah, it is a square. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just big and square.
Uh-huh.
But now I love how you lock all the shapes together. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen, how all of the ochreish shapes are all just locked in by the purplish dark greens, and then you go into those beautiful mauves, and then you've got that kind of Van Gogh sky color. I don't know, the yellowish turquoise. What would we call it? But there are echoes of that in the ochreish greens. It's beautifully harmonious work.
Well,
Beautiful work.
thank you. It's probably done just with a few colors to get that harmony.
How many colors do you tend to work with on a painting, in a painting?
It's a great question. In the field, probably about 6 to 8, maybe. And in the studio, I'm trying to do maybe 4.
Uh-huh. And what's your current set that you're playing around with right now?
Outside?
No, 4. When you do 4 colors,
Well,
what would be a typical, what 4 colors? Or does it vary from painting to painting?
it varies from painting to painting. Yeah. Okay. I have studied with Skip Whitcomb, who is phenomenal as far as helping you with color and stepping outside your comfort zone, and limiting your palette, but doing it very thoughtfully. And so you can, I mean, a painting might have like a violet, a lemon yellow, a yellow green, and then maybe an alizarin. You know, some weird thing, but it's very thoughtful how you might come up with a certain combination.
I'm taking a year-long watercolor workshop with Andy Evenson online, and I keep paring down the watercolors to ultramarine, burnt sienna, and like a golden ochre, and then a kind of a lavender, which in my oil painting, I'm now trying to see if I can mimic that, and am using those, the ultramarine, the burnt sienna, ultramarine, burnt sienna, the violet, that kind of,
maybe a rose would work in one.
Exactly, permanent rose, basically,
Yeah.
And a cerulean blue.
Yeah.
That you can do pretty much anything with very few colors. I think that's one of the crutches that we fall into, is like thinking, oh, maybe I can touch the face of God if I buy this color, you know.
Yeah.
And either you're going to touch the face of God or you're not going to touch the face of God. It's not going to come through one particular color, I don't think. Let's look at the next one. This is a recent plein air?
Yeah, that was last week. Right, maybe across the street from where I live.
And what size is that? Is that a 12 by 12 or 16 by 16?
I think it's about a 10 by 12.
10 by 12, okay. So tell us a little about this.
Okay, so this, it was frigid cold that day, but we've had such great snow here, and I just made myself get out there and paint it, because there's probably nothing more than I like better than painting surf, rocks, or snow. Because again, you don't have a lot of color to deal with. I love a drab day. And I just, drove around. Oh, I forgot my white paint, had to go home. That you can't do a lot with snow without your white paint. And I love the texture. I have to fall in love with something about a scene. And I think, and I have to know it in my head, what is that? And that probably was the texture of those reeds, the passage of the stream, which was a melted puddle, and then the texture of those grasses against all that flat snow. And so that's what I was trying to get to.
Right, and that to me, that's so juicy and beautiful. I just the thing I love is that you've absolutely nailed the color notes. I mean, you look at the real world the bit of the real world we can see behind the painting, and it flows. That world flows right into that painting, and then your big shapes. And this one, you're losing a lot more of it's got a lot more of the lost edges that I associate with you.
Okay.
And the way you do the underbrush to the left of the mass of the tree, well, actually on both sides of the tree, but the painterly aspect of the way you tell us that story. There's so many ways you can tell a story. I mean, and that is what we are as painters, right? Is storytellers. And the way you're telling that story there is just, it's so not over describing it. It's telling us how it feels. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. How long did this piece take?
Maybe an hour and a half.
Uh-huh.
I have no idea. When I stopped, I could not even, my fingers were purple. It was so cold. And I think you just get into a lot less trouble, when you're outside. And it was really the temperature that made me quit. If I were trying to do this inside from a photo, I'm sure I would over render, overdo it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't catch that stuff on the left. I probably just got tired, or cold, and so stopped. But you can edit it out, and you can, I think it's just so valuable to be out there and to be cold, because I like to be uncomfortable when I paint, because I'm really feeling what it is to be there, and I can paint cold. If I'm comfortable inside, it's a little harder to translate that to canvas, I think.
Right. That's a good point. On the other hand, it's nice to be able to feel your fingers.
Well, it is. Yes.
So
I think if it was worth it or not.
Marty is wondering what the palette is, what the palette you used for this.
Probably used a cad yellow light, a cad lemon, just my regular outdoor palette, a cad red light, a permanent rose, ultramarine blue, and a cobalt blue, and a ton of white. I might have had an ochre on the palette, but that's my kind of go-to outdoor palette. And I don't need all those colors to come up with gray.
You like to have them.
Yes.
On your website, do you have that information about what your basic palette is and stuff?
No, but I can put it up there.
Yeah. Oh, you ought to do, Valerie Whipple Craig.
What's that, Charlie Hunter?
You ought to become a Blick affiliate. I'm a Blick affiliate, and on my webpage, I have a materials list. And if people order from the webpage, I get food for the cats.
Nice.
I get a small check, and that goes to food for the cats. So if people don't order off my webpage, my cats starve. So I've been able to monetize people's guilt about my cats, and they get to use the exact colors that I would suggest. So,
all right, thanks.
Think about doing that.
My puppy might be eating better, so thank you.
Yeah, or might be eating it all. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Tell us about this one.
Okay, so this was I did this for the quick draw for Olmsted Plein Air last year, which put a plug in there for Olmsted Plein Air, which is based out of Atlanta. I think they led the charge during the pandemic about reinventing what a plein air event could be when nobody could go down there. And so they let us all paint from our own homes, studios, neighborhoods, and they did it all virtual. And it was a terrific incentive when I might have just wanted to sit around and eat French toast when we were in lockdown. And I had to paint. I had to give them 8 to 9 paintings. And it was a great inspiration.
Now, this one to me really looks like a pastel.
Oh.
Were you ever a pastelist?
I was never a pastelist. I love pastels because it's something I cannot do. I think it might because I did it on top of an old painting, which is what I love to do. And you get all whatever's coming out from underneath it, which is probably a landscape. And so you get just a lot of layers. And there's some reds poking through the greens, which give it a lot of life. So maybe. And then you can drag paint across it, and still you get things coming through.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point that you make. And it's something we tend to white paintings out, which is stupid. We should leave paintings, even if they're bad paintings, and let them dry thoroughly and keep painting on top of them. Because yes, 2 or 3 of my absolute favorite paintings ended up being entirely different paintings done on top of bad paintings that had nothing to do with the subject matter of the final painting. So Kelly is saying, stunning textures, what support do you paint on? So there is an old painting underneath this, but even underneath that, what was the basic substrate you were using?
It's a board, like a birch plywood with linen mounted on top of that. I get a lot of my supplies from Source Tech. Mm-hmm. The other supply I use is I just get birch plywood and I coat it with gesso myself.
So not using gesso, it's gesso on board.
Gesso on board, at least 3 coats of gesso, right. or I use Source Tech's panels.
Right. So yeah, Source Tech that's beautiful stuff. Source Tech does make great stuff. The color of the thistles, that purple against the
I think there's some cobalt violet in there to make that thing sing like that.
Yeah, there's got to be something. There's some beautiful
something. I think that's one time I've used cobalt violet, which I'd love to do in a whole painting.
That's a beautiful piece. I love the way you did the stems, because the stems are basically negative shapes. You've painted the bright color of the grass of the field behind the stems, and that's how you define the stems. It looks like, to me at least. Is that true, or am I?
No, that's true. It's probably a bit of both. It's probably a bit of both. Lost and found. I am never finishing one thing. It's always a bit of what's in back of it and a bit of it's on it, and what's next to it. Just all the time working both.
Yeah, that's a lovely piece.
And then destroying the edges so that they kind of go into each other.
And when you destroy your edges, what do you destroy the edges with? Palette knife, brush?
Mostly a knife. Sometimes a soft brush. I'm trying to use a soft brush more. Mostly a knife or a card. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any particular card? Do you find Visa works better than a MasterCard, or
the Gap credit card works really well?
Gap credit card works well. Okay. We did a music every Saturday. We do the Roots on the Rails well-oiled machine, where we chat with a musician, and we were chatting with Curtis McMurtry last week, and he uses a New York City Metro card woven in between his guitar strings to get a very percussive sound not all the time, but on some of his songs. And he says it has to be a New York City Metro card. And Washboard Hank always said that an Ontario license plate was the best for playing washboard on, as opposed to any other state's license plate. So this stuff does count for something.
Yeah.
Next slide, please, Betty Sue. That's a beauty. This reminds me of like a Tom Thompson palette. Talk to us about this one.
Okay, so this little guy was started outside probably 2 years ago, and then in one of my pandemic days of just taking things like the 100 paintings that are unfinished times 3, dragged it out and thought and I always say you're gonna make it or break it, or you're gonna do or die. And the challenge with it, so I had the underpinning, I had the contrast of the light and shadow, and I didn't want to lose that because that was from outside and that was probably very real. I didn't have any reference to look at, but I had to change. I had to alter the shapes because they were looking like fingers, the fingers of light, and so to kind of work with that is what I did inside. So that was repainting, refinishing in the studio with a half painted painting. If I recall.
Just go with it. That's the story. That's the story for today that we're saying. When I look at this, I love how you've broken up. What I want people to look at is how each of the shapes of light, and consequently the shapes of the shadows, they're different scale. So the eye moves, or the eye moves around. You don't see repeating. One of the things that's really easy to do is what my friend Mitch Baird calls marching soldiers.
Yeah.
A bunch of repeating shapes.
Right.
And you are the master or the mistress of these mid-tone, these mid-values, getting chromatic difference in those midtones. And what you were saying about color being relatively unimportant, I mean, the color that it is may be relatively important, but the value is tremendously important.
The value is extraordinarily important to me, and the temperature is extremely important. And what color it is, it doesn't matter.
Interesting. Any expounding on that you'd like to do?
Well, I just know when some people say, "Oh, you're painting in different colors now." You know, whether you don't usually paint in turquoises, and I might think, "Oh, I didn't know I did. I didn't know I didn't." Because when I'm looking at something, I'm not thinking, "Oh, that's violet," or "Oh, it's aqua." I'm thinking, "What's the relative? What is it? Warmer or cooler than what it's next to? Is it lighter or darker?"
Mm-hmm.
That's all I keep thinking, but I'm not thinking hue. I'm not thinking, is it yellow orange? I just think it's warmer. What do I need to go to? And it might be a yellow goes to a yellow orange to be warmer.
Right. Your darkest dark.
Is it brighter or duller? Like the light on the snow, I can see it's very yellow now, but all I was thinking is it brighter or more muted than that sun coming back? How do I play off of that? Because everything can't be the same.
Right. Now we're getting a question of what colors you use in your darks. I was going to ask, are your darks are your darkest darks predominantly warm?
Predominantly, yes. Yeah. Yes. If they're cold, yeah, I don't like the feeling of that. So warm, I'm always injecting some red in there. There's probably, if I'm looking at it, transparent earth red or burnt sienna. I like the transparent earth red. Would warm that up. I'm sure there's ultramarine blue. And there's probably maybe a transparent earth yellow. So those are three primaries, all fairly dark and transparent.
Right. Now transparent earth. Right. What I'm unfamiliar with. It's probably quite. Would it be similar to the Van Dyke brown that I use?
I would say no. It's redder. It's like a burnt sienna. The Van Dyke brown would be like a duller, like an umber.
Yeah, each manufacturer, of course, is different. What is your predominant brand?
For that would be Gamblin.
Gamblin, okay.
Yeah, I tend to use Holbein, Gamblin, and Winsor Newton. All my Winsor Newton are the same colors that I used when I painted watercolor, because it was one less thing to have to learn.
Because Winsor Newton, when I teach, people will sometimes show up with Winsor Newton raw umber, and I use Cobra, which is Rembrandt, and their raw umber is entirely transparent, and Winsor Newton raw umber is not. It is a kind of reddish. It's a very dull raw umber. So I mean, when we're talking about these colors, ladies and gentlemen, do keep in mind that each manufacturer's version of these colors is going to have its own properties. And it's one of the wonderful things that we all like to do, us painters like to do, is after a day of painting, go sit around and eat fried food and drink beer and talk about talk that would eye glaze any normal human being.
Oh, yeah, I know. And I found myself going, "Oh wow, now we're getting into the good stuff."
Into the good stuff. But it's the adventure that you are on in terms of how you build your paintings. I just love, because it's a fundamentally different. Even though the lessons we're talking about are exactly the same, the fundamental ideas are exactly the same. The way you tell the story is so differs from how I do it, and I'm so admiring of it. I love this piece.
Oh, thank you, John.
Is there another one, or is that it, Betty? So, oh yes, the chickens. Talk to us about this one.
So this was another one that was started outside, and last spring I took it out and thought it had a good idea, but it was completely gray. And the problem was when I was inside, I was able to really think. I have had the time to understand what was wrong, and it was all one value. And so the challenge was to, like decide on that foreground, the chicken yard, making that brighter, warmer. Everything looked like a kind of like the roof. It was about the same value. And then lighten up that background. But is the background lighter than the foreground? All those choices.
Right.
And then that helped those chickens pop out. I think I added them. I don't think they were in there when I first took it out. And it's really abstract. This is another thing that we were talking about earlier, about having it like just sort of teeter on the edge of abstract, but it's something. And
right.
That's really where I would love to keep going.
Right. And the way you've done the chickens, let's just grab onto the chickens. Abstract versus non-abstract. Yeah. One of the things that I had not thought about, but that Andy talks about in the watercolor class I'm taking, is you really only have to detail, if you're doing like a herd of cows or a group of people, you only have to do one or two of them carefully. And then you can do just some marks, and the human brain is going to say, oh, that's more of this crowd of people, or more of that herd of cows. So you did the rooster, the over on the left, the white one. You did he's pretty carefully light, dark shaped. Yes, Betty Sue has the cursor and is pointing out the rooster. And then the hen to his right, boy, you got the shape of that hen so beautifully.
Thanks.
And then in the background, that hen that's off to itself, over on the upper right, toward the right. That's barely a hen. We would not know that was a hen were it not for your narrative clarity in the foreground, I think.
Yep. And it would be very static if all of them were painted very carefully. They wouldn't be moving around, which chickens don't stop.
No,
they don't hold still. And so they have to be kind of washed out a little bit, kind of odd, just to give that feeling.
Yeah, boy, so good, so good. And I love the composition of this. It's the slight kind of askew angle of it, rather than static. The roof line coming in from the right of the, I guess I think it's another smaller shed. Is slightly tilted, so it gives it kind of a kinetic energy. Everything is heading down into that area behind the rooster's head. Just lovely, lovely. And the tree in the background, the big tree, terrific, not overly described, absolutely just enough information is there.
Thank you.
And look at, ladies and gentlemen, see, she doesn't do the tree separated from the roof. Everything moves into the next thing next to it. And she'll do a hard line occasionally when it's called for, but look at all the edges that she is willing to lose or to mute. Masterful work here, masterful work. And nice little color highlights. I didn't know you worked in greens.
Oh, I don't. That's cerulean.
Oh, okay. Is that the last one, Betty Sue, or is there another one? Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Valerie.
Really
terrific to take a little walk through your world. So, what projects are you working on coming up? What do you got?
I have a show up in New York, up in Saratoga, New York. So, getting some work. I'm trying to dare to go bigger. That's a big goal. Getting some pieces up there for that, and then the Olmsted plein air too.
You're doing Olmsted.
Yeah.
And is that going to be remote again, or is that going to be
a choice? Some people will go down, and you can also do it virtually.
Okay. Did you see our friend Uncle Doug? Just like he's doing, he's like putting up on Instagram these, 60 by 80s. He said, I blocked this one in 3 hours. It's like, Fuck you, Uncle Doug. It's like,
I know. Yeah, and that was yesterday, and then today another one.
yeah, exactly. And
It's obnoxious.
it's obnoxious.
I know, I'm trying to go big. I'm like, I'm going up to a 12 by 20.
Yeah, so how big is big? What's the maximum size you're working on?
Maximum might be 30 by 30. Yeah, huge.
Yeah. Or you should get, I went and bought 4 hollow core doors on the suggestion of Uncle Doug. And I'm using those as substrate. That forces you to paint big because those are 30 by 80.
Wow.
So try that.
All right.
Well, I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing this year. To me, you're one of the really inspiring painters out there. And I hope our paths cross again sometime soon.
Hope so. Thank you, Charlie.
All right. Thank you. Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye.